Hi, folks. I've got a couple of guests on today. I'm going to step away from COVID a little bit for the day, just as a bit of a reprieve from the current goings on in the world. But as I've mentioned to a lot of people previously on reports and just in offhand shows that I've done, nobody in Australia actually owns their land, folks. We've really had a number done on us here in this country in so many ways. And there's a couple of guys here who've looked into this and have sort of put it into a nutshell and are pretty keen to get the word out to Australians to let them know just how much they're being scammed by this government. So I'd like to welcome Nathan Kenyon and Derek Balogh to the show. Is that the way you pronounce the name?
Balogh will be okay. Balogh, yeah, it throws people off, but it's Balogh. Yep, that's the
Balogh. Okay, I didn't get it right, but okay. So I'd like to invite these guys to the show so they can tell us about what's going on. Derek, Nathan's got his little 1-year-old daughter there sitting in on the program, so she might have a couple of words to say during it, and that'll all be good. But welcome to the show, guys. What do you got for us?
Well, thanks very much, Max, for having us. The reason why we've got Nathan as well, because Nathan was part of my my banking mortgage Zooms last year, and we've categorically proven with every bank in Australia, no one will be able to get a copy of their mortgage. And we've done the letters, we've got a process, we're requesting a copy of mortgages and the copy of the document that goes alongside it, called the Memorandum of Common Provisions. And the banks can't provide them because they don't have them, because they've sold them to a third party and put them onto the Australian Stock Exchange. So people need to understand, we've gone through a process, and in that process, we found that there are people who have paid off a mortgage, but because of COVID-19, they can't get a property title. And this is in every state across Australia. This is what we need to get the message out. No one owns a property. We're just paying rent.
Sorry about
that. We're just paying rent to our landlords who are living in the United States of America. Or I should say more correctly, the United States Incorporated.
So what you're saying is that if, like, people own land and they'll take out a mortgage on their land, and they'll pay off the mortgage, and then they, in theory, own their land, and they can now use that as more surety for whatever. You're telling me that this is no longer the case. People, once they've paid off their mortgage, they can't get any clarity on the fact that they've done it and the fact that they actually own their land.
No one owns property in Australia right now.
No one owns property in Australia.
No one. We're paying rent.
See,
that's a very controversial statement with a lot of people. We did our paperwork for some exercises for people in Queensland. Anna Palachuk, your wonderful leader, I call her Palachuk because that's how you say her name properly. She destroyed property titles in October 2019.
I call her pail of shit because she really is a bucket of shit. But
fine. Now we understand each other. Great.
Well, it got to the point, like I've been telling people for years that you don't own your land in Australia anyway. All you own is a location of title. You own a lot number. If most people look at their deed of title or whatever they've got, I don't think they've even got deeds of title anymore. I don't even know what it's called. They'll find that its lot number is written down. That's what they own. They own lot number such and such. All lot means is location of title. So all they actually owned to begin with was coordinates on a map. They didn't actually own any country. And what you're saying, they don't even own that location of title anymore. They don't even own the map coordinates anymore.
No, because we don't have any property rights, because we've given them up, because nobody wants to fight for our constitutional rights, which is estate fee simple. And a lot of people I speak to say, oh, hasn't that gone out? I said, no, unless you don't want your property. Estate fee simple means you have exclusive right to your land, not a piece of paper. That is our birthright in the Commonwealth Constitution 1900. But if you don't want your property rights, go along with the scam that our property titles have been traded to United States Incorporated, which owns our property titles and our mortgages. We have no rights, period.
Wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. Great to be Australian, the lucky country, land of the free. What's your background, Derek? Just for people, just quickly.
I'm a small business advocate. I've been fighting the good fight for small business people for 7 years. I've had my own small businesses, so I know the fight that we have is all against us, our small business owners. And I have a background many, many years ago, another lifetime almost, of being an accredited mortgage consultant. So I was able to deal with every Australian bank. And if I told people what I saw, they wouldn't believe me. Forging of signatures, creation of tax return documents, pay slips, and so on is rife in order to get a deal across the table. And I got out after a very short time because I said, this is so corrupt, it's not even ridiculous. And I now can see the problems it's causing on the other side of the fence. And that's where we are here today. And it's led me down this pathway of fighting in every Supreme Court and understanding we don't have courts in Australia. They're franchises.
Well, this is all corporate because it's a corporate system. What's your background, Nathan? Just quickly.
I'm more a bit like you. I sort of came into the world growing up thinking this place isn't right. And just as the years went on, I have a military background. I used to work on offshore oil rigs, and I finished with that and just sort of focused a bit more on research and got into what Derek's doing.
Okay. You could probably turn your audio up a little bit or bring your mic a little bit closer if you can, Nathan.
Okay. Apologies.
Now, I've said to a lot of people about the Australian government has been incorporated. You're pretty knowledgeable on this. So, like, what is government and what is a corporation? What is the difference between the two?
Well, we've been led to believe that we do have government because we have federal elections every 3 years. I call that window dressing. Because what everybody needs to understand is we vote for a politician, but when you write to them, they don't care what we think in between elections. They just want our votes when we come to election time. Because when they all trottle off down to Canberra, they're going into a corporatized building, which has got nothing to do with the Australian people, exactly the same situation as in the United States. Washington, D.C. is not part of the United States of America. It's a separate entity. It's a separate country. So is the Australian Capital Territory. The building, which has got a little symbol on the top of the door, as you look at from the street, has got a star and a kangaroo and an emu. That's incorporated. It's a business. It's a trading company registered at Washington, D.C., which is under bankruptcy. I've got the papers, which I'm happy to send you, Max. I don't know if you can see it. The Commonwealth of Australia is incorporated at the United States Securities Exchange Commission. It's a business like McDonald's.
Yeah, I've mentioned this to people for years. That it's a corporate system. An interesting thing as well. I mean, you can tell that it's a corporate system because voting is compulsory in Australia, and something that my sister did actually to get herself off the electoral roll. Just to get off the topic for a minute, I'll just throw this in for a minute. She wrote in and said, "I want to be removed from the electoral roll," and they said, "Well, you can't because it's compulsory." And she said, "Oh, okay. Well, since Australia is incorporated as a corporation, and here is the business number of the incorporation, and therefore operates under corporate law, and under corporate law, only shareholders of the corporation may vote for the new CEO. If it's compulsory for me to vote, that would indicate that I'm a shareholder. So if you don't have my bank account details already, who can I forward them to? And when can I expect my first payment of dividends?" And by the way, since I've been a shareholder unknown to myself since I was 18 and put on the electoral roll, I'd like back payments for all of those dividends for the last 45 years, And within 2 months, they'd taken her name off the electoral roll. They didn't send her any messages back, but they took her name off the electoral roll, because under corporate law, only shareholders are able to vote for the new CEO, which is essentially what people are voting for every year when they vote for the Prime Minister. They're voting for a new CEO of the corporation. So, yeah. Are Australian states all incorporated as well?
State of Queensland, Crown in right of New South Wales, the state of Victoria, etc., all registered at the corporate United States, incorporated in Washington, D.C.
That's the problems, you see, people. It's a big corporate system that we're working in, which is this is what their birth certificates and all this stuff is about. So the Australian courts, you said before that it's very difficult to find any remedy within the Australian courts. How do the Australian courts actually operate?
Well, I'll give you the short answer, which is given to me by a very, very highly qualified witnessing judge. And he said that the win rate of an Australian court is the same as Crown Casino. 86% will lose and 14% are allowed to win. Why? To give some people some hope that there are some people that can win in the courts. The numbers are the same. Now, we've done our research because I have another document which we've just been able to locate. It took us quite some time, and it's about the US bankruptcy, and it brings in Australia because all of our federal government, I'm using federal government because to keep the conversation people understand, but I'm calling it the Australian corporation. The state corporations, the Australian courts all come under two major entities. The Australian courts come under the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Incorporated, and our states come under direct control of the International Monetary Fund. I've got the document to back it up. We are traded like cattle. We are no different to a farm animal. They are trading us on our car rego, our payments, our council rates, our mortgages. Everything we pay is securitized. What does securitizing mean? Well, our state roads agencies or a bank will bundle up all of these documents, put them into a trust, and flog them off onto the stock exchange. That's the short description. Everything we do, from our water rates, which should be free under the Constitution, from driving on a road, you don't pay money to a toll company unless you want to, because that's breaking the Constitution. We have the freedom of travel across Australia, but they've set up a corporation. Yes, those corporations come under the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
So it's just one big scam. It's one big scam. This is what I've been saying to people. This is why I don't vote and why I don't fill out tax forms and I don't do any of this stuff, because I refuse to support organised crime, because the Australian government system is, in fact, organised crime in its purest form. That's what these people are doing. And it's great that you've uncovered all this information. There's a couple of really significant dates in all of this as well, isn't there? The date, I think it was in 1999. The 1st and 6th of November 1999. Can you talk about those two dates for us, please?
Okay. In doing my affidavits, because I have done hundreds of affidavits for people across Australia going to courts, we keep on finding whether it's a council, whether it's a courthouse, whether it's a company, whether it's a state or federal government, they're all registered on the 1st of November 1999. And I have to keep on digging and looking, and I found eventually the answer to my question was that there were two men in the United States called David Wynn Miller and Russell J. Gould who claimed the US flag, and they took America out of bankruptcy on the 2nd of November 1999. That is not a coincidence. Why? All of our government agencies were registered as corporations 24 hours earlier. Let's go back to the 2nd of November. When the United States came out of their bankruptcy, it took Australia out of bankruptcy because we are indebted to the American banking system. Everything comes back to the banking system. And as Nathan can say in his own words, he can't get a piece of paper, whatever he does, to write to these people to say, why is he paying a mortgage? They can't give him a piece of paper to say, here's a copy of your contract. It's gone. So let's move on down to the end of the week. That Saturday, the 6th of November, 1999, many Australians will remember we had a national vote called a national referendum, which comes under, and I'm just looking for my Commonwealth Constitution booklet. I tell everybody you need to go to your federal member's office and get a copy of this book. Why? Because Section 128 says we have to have a national vote to change the Constitution. And we did have a vote. And we said in every state, including Queensland, which I argue is not a state because you don't have an upper house. Queensland is equal to the Northern Territory and the ACT. You have a lower house. You do not have an upper house. Putting that aside, we all said no to having a republic. Every state said no. We said, not interested. We want to keep exactly the same. We want to keep the constitutional monarchy. And within 10 months, Victoria removed the oath of allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen of England. And some people will say, I don't care who she is. And I say to people, I'm not interested. I like her laws to keeping my property rights in place. Couldn't keep my family. But what I'm saying is, constitutional monarchy, we have property rights, we have legal rights, we have constitutional rights, and they've all been taken from us in the last 20 years. So the 1st of November, all of these agencies and councils and all these other courts and everything else incorporated with an ABN to pay GST. And then on the 6th of November, we said, no, we don't want a republic. We want to keep the Queen. And the politicians said, the people don't understand. We're going to become a republic anyway by stealth. And now we are paying for it because people are being dragged into the courts and they're having their properties taken from them. And there's not one piece of evidence from the bank of a mortgage. It's gone, but they take them anyway. Why? The Labor Party does not believe Australians should be allowed to own property. That's their mantra.
So how is any of this legal? How can any of this be even conceived to be legal under any form of law at all? I mean, really, how can it be legal, any of this?
None of it, Max. The short answer is there's nothing that's legal in our laws because they changed the laws and took out the Queen and said, oh, no, we're a grown-up country now. We can do whatever we like. No, we can't. We have to have a national vote. And we did, and we had that vote, and we said no.
See, I'm no fan of the Queen and the British family. Absolutely not the British royal family. But like you say, under a constitutional monarchy, at least for people who actually believe government is real and that you need these people, at least under that form of a legal system, we have property rights. Like you say, we have property rights and we have constitutional power under that system. And the Australian Constitution is a good document and could be used if you're going to respect that government system exists at all. But that's been taken away from us. And this really essentially is an abuse of office by the politicians. I mean, you can't even say it's an abuse of power because the politicians who hold these offices have used the offices that they hold to delegate themselves powers that they have no right to have to begin with. And they've used that to simply march over the mouths and the heads of the people and use their stormtroopers to inflict their will. And this is a gross miscarriage of justice. It's an undermining of the rule of law in this country. It's an undermining of democracy in this country. And the people really need to be aware of what's going on here. The government in this country does not serve the people. This is a criminal organization masquerading as government. They've even got their own little insignia of the emu and the lion, the emu and the kangaroo out the front of the door. When really, if they're working under British law, it should be the unicorn and the lion. That is the British coat of arms, which should be there. And even with the way they've done it with the Commonwealth of Government of Australia and the Australian Commonwealth Government, which are two separate entities, they've created a whole corporate system which looks like government, but it isn't, and it's a criminal empire. And the people have really got to rally up and do something about this. What do you see as any type of remedy to this situation? I guess the first step is getting this information to people. But what do you see as a viable way forward from this point?
Well, having fought many times in the courts, and it doesn't matter what argument we bring up, we say we want our constitutional rights. They say we're not having that. And I've had people in New South Wales bring in a blue ensign flag and drape it over their shoulder. And they've seen judges walking out of the back door of the court because they can't continue because they're under the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and they're trading our birth certificates when you go to court. So that's when I say, okay, we can give them an option. You either give us our constitutional rights, which we know you can't give us because you're corporate. So if you can't provide the contract that the court is not a courthouse, it's a bank branch, this is going to be the problem where we're going to start to say we have to put in a multi-billion-dollar claim against all those people who've lost their properties. This is the only way it's going to happen to force change, but Australians are not very good at coming together. I keep on saying in Paris, if the government changes people's pensions, they stop the city. They get out there and they stop. They actually make a protest and they say nothing moves until we come out and the government backs down. In Australia, we would never have that. Let's go to the park. Let's go and wave some flags and make a bit of noise. The politicians now know in Victoria, we have got no defence and we have nothing to say because they've got an army of stormtroopers, and all they do is they pick out people from the crowd and they go to Facebook and say, we're going to come to your house and tell you got a $10,000 fine.
Yeah, well, screw their fines. Their fines are invalid. I won't pay any of them because it's all rubbish anyway. And if I ever go to court, I'll go there and speak for myself. I won't even represent myself because I don't have to represent myself. I am myself. I really think it's time for us to. I mean, we need to talk to the tribal people as well about all this. I mean, with the Recognition Act that came, that Julia Gillard enacted. And acknowledged, she actually acknowledged that tribal law still exists on this country. I'd like to see tribal elders simply walk into Parliament House and take it over and tell these people to get out because they have no right to be there to begin with. I can't see any remedy in class actions against these people. What I see is we need people to simply stand up in their face and call them out for what they are. They're liars, criminals, and traitors to this country, and they need to be seen as such. I don't believe any of their laws are entitled to any obedience. I don't believe any of their fines are valid or entitled to any obedience. And I think it's time for the people of this country to rally up. I really do. I really do. I mean, sure, there's legal ways we can do it. I've been talking to legal people, like I've been talking to John Adams, who's an economist, who's very concerned about the direction the country's going in. And he actually used to work for the Howard government. He's very, very versed on how to do submissions to Parliament and how to, he's that left brain sort of, he's half awake of things, He's a nice guy, but still thinks in that government corporate mindset. But even he is seeing that there's real problems. I think, sure, we need to approach it from that direction. We need to approach it with class actions, and we need to approach it from all directions, but we need to also approach it from a human direction. What we are dealing with here are people, just men in suits that we actually employ to inhabit these offices and manage our infrastructure for us in a responsible way. And what they've done is they've stolen the silverware and they've sold the mansion out from under the feet of the people who actually own the mansion, and now they're forcing us to live in the basement while they're selling off the garden and everything that they can. And they're actually our servants who are supposed to be serving us in a responsible manner. They're all in abuse of the office that they hold. They've undermined this country to a most egregious degree, and we need a real rallying up of the people. I'd like to see a massive strike in this country and everyone just assemble out the front of the Parliament houses and say, okay, come out here and explain yourselves to us, or we'll put you on Christmas Island, because we can get any garden variety pickpocket to run this country better than you guys are doing. Get all the politicians and put them on Christmas Island. We'll give them all a hammer and they can all have their war,
We've got a slightly different remedy, Max, if I can.
Sure.
It's actually 12 months to this very day that I was involved in a court case with the Southeast Queensland family from the hinterland behind the Gold Coast, and the Commonwealth Bank, the same bank that Nathan is connected to, wanted to take their property. And I said to these people, and don't quote me exactly because some people are going to say something about what I'm going to say next, is this family wrote to the Commonwealth Bank and gave them 3 promissory notes for $4.3 million to clear the debt. We said in the Supreme Court of Queensland, we'll give you the keys to the property, but you're going to give us back our property rights and our legal property, the 3 promissory notes. CommBank couldn't find them. They were traded. In the meantime, we took a qui tam lawsuit against the Commonwealth Bank to the ICC, the only court in the world which is valid, which is not under the Federal Reserve Bank. It's an independent, self-standing government-created body of the governments around the world, I should say. It has got nothing to do with the banking system. Fast forward to the 16th of March 2020, there was a meeting on the Gold Coast. The witnessing judge and his family were dealing with the Commonwealth Bank chief executive and his board, who flew up to the Gold Coast. They said, let's have a look at what this is all about. And they left after the meeting, whipping up a mortgage for $2 million, giving back the property title in lieu of paying $25 million US to the ICC for a penalty of perjury. This is the only remedy we have, is the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which Australia was a founding country. And this is where we are going to go with our banking groups, because there's no mortgages, there's no property titles. We are paying rent to the US landlords, the bondholders who buy shares in those trusts. That's the only way we are now able to go forward.
Okay, well, what's the process for that? Like, I guess you need a lot of people to get involved to be able to do this. I mean, everybody who owns property, who thinks they own property, should get involved in this. I mean, what is the process that you're using to do this, brother?
Well, that's what these meetings, which we're going to restart again very soon, but because of this document called the US bankruptcy paperwork, this has changed everything I'm doing, because now we have proven that the Australian courts are a franchise business of another bigger bank. So I'm trying to bring together 40 people per bank, and it's been a struggle because there are some people who say, I can't rock the boat, I don't want to poke the bear, I just want to sit at home and lock the door at night and hope the boogeyman stays away.
He won't.
If we get 40 people per bank, then we can do our own class action, to use the expression, and take the Commonwealth Bank and every other bank to the ICC for $1 billion. We've done it with one family in Queensland, and the Commonwealth Bank said, no, we are not going to the ICC. We'll rip up a $2 million mortgage and give back the property title, but we are not going to the ICC.
Okay, well, everybody out there listening to this, I think you need to get in contact with Derek, folks, because how hard would it be to find 40 people from each bank? It shouldn't be too hard to find. I imagine I've got 40 people from each bank listening to the show right now. So I think
Max,
people should contact Derek and do something about this. How can this be applied to government as well? Because it's really government that's done this. It's the politicians who put this in place. So
it is government. I'm going to bring in Nathan right now and say, Nathan, can you just say to Max and to everybody else, you're part of that Commonwealth Bank group. How many people actually speak and say, I'm in, like you? And how many people are absolutely stone cold scared about what we're doing? I'll leave it to you.
I'll say at least 60-70% of them are on the fence, at least.
50 to 70% of them on the fence and a little bit too scared to put their heads up.
Yeah, and just too afraid to see it through.
I think that you'll probably find some of the listeners of this show will stick their hands up and their heads up. I mean, most of the people that tune into my show and my broadcasts and my podcasts know that the world is heading to hell in a handbasket, and there's no way you can avoid what's coming. I've been telling people to have a plan B, have a safe spot, have whatever, but there's all sorts of ways we can still reclaim this world. So get involved, folks, because if you think you're going to keep your head down and that it's all going to go away, well, it's not. You're seeing what they're doing to the world through this whole COVID scam. They're turning the whole world into lockdown, into a police state, and this is never ever going to go away. Here we are on day something like 396 of 14 days to flatten the curve. Don't think any of this is going to go away. So a lot of people listening to this show, I think, would want to be involved in this, and I'm certainly putting it out there that people should. If you're a landowner in Australia and you've got a mortgage to a bank, I'd say you should call Derek and get involved in this. You might find that you can set a really good example for the rest of this country. I mean, like you say, one person's already done it and you've had success. The banks aren't going to want to do this. They're not going to want to go to the ICC. So I think people really should get involved with this. And I'll put Derek's contact details below so you can go and check this out. What else do you want to cover while we're here? It'd be good to keep this as short as possible. What else do you think is important to bring to people while we're here and while we're doing this?
Well, the most important thing I'd like to say, Max, is people say to me, oh, the Constitution doesn't work for us. And I said, yeah, it doesn't work because you're not speaking up to your politicians and writing them a my will letter. And I had a couple that said to me about a week ago, oh, Derek, I wrote a my will letter and it didn't work. What do we do now? I said, you keep writing. And they said, what, a second one? I said, yes, because we are not good at telling our politicians we are not happy about these COVID laws. And in Victoria, I don't call it the Emergency Powers Act. I call it the Martial Law Act. And they say, what do you mean? I said, Chairman Dan does not have anybody to answer to. He doesn't have a governor, and neither does any other state in Australia. They are figureheads. He can do as he wishes. When he gets that law through, we need to know our constitutional rights. And that constitutional rights includes writing a my will letter. We are not happy with this law. It takes away our Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act. But hold on, Derek, I live in Queensland or New South Wales. I said, you can access my Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act in every state through your Supreme Court. No one knows Section 5 and Section 6, which gives you access to this book, which I'll hold it up again for your viewers, a copy of Australia's Constitution. But hold on, you said the Commonwealth Constitution. Yes, this is modified. This has been changed since 1900. There are small changes in it. I'm talking about the Commonwealth Constitution, which is our birthright. It's the birth certificate of this country. This is it. This created our 6 states. So if you don't know it, you are legally naked. You're legally naked at Section 51, subsection 23A, not to have civil conscription of medical experiments. If you don't know Section 51, 23A, they will come to your door and say, we have got a law that we have to vaccinate you. Section 10 of the Charter on Human Rights says you must give consent to be involved in anything medical. You've got to give written permission. If you don't know Section 10 of the Charter of Human Rights, and I speak about this every day on the phone and on Zooms, you are legally naked. You have no protections. That's what I'd love to make sure that everybody knows, those 2 sections about COVID, vaccinations, and all this garbage they're forcing upon us.
Yeah, well, they're able to do it under the Biosecurity Act. If they're able to enact due to a state of emergency. I would challenge their claim of any state of emergency. I mean, this alleged virus, by their own claim, has a 99.998% survival rate. So you have a 0.002% chance of ever dying from this thing. They're saying that the vaccine is 50% effective to 90% effective. I mean, so many people are getting injured from the vaccine. There is no state of emergency. They've recategorized the flu, and that's all this is. The whole thing is being based on a massive fraud. I would say anything they're enacting in relation to COVID and calling law is a fraud in itself. It is void, it is invalid, it is worthy of no obedience, entitled to no obedience. And you can find this because people who've been getting fined these $1,600 fines that little Danny Hunchback, dictator of Victoria, is handing out to people, many people just aren't paying the fines, and then they're just throwing them away. They won't take them to court because if you challenge it in court, it has no basis. It won't stand up, and even their corporate court, it won't stand up. So I think all these laws are void, invalid, worthy of no obedience. I think Daniel Andrews is in abuse of the office that he holds. He's entitled to no obedience, and he should be arrested for his actions. That's what I think should happen to him. But like you say, I mean, who's going to do that? Because there's no government, there's no oversight on any of the things these state premiers are doing. That's the problem. So the oversight's got to come from the people. We've got to realize that what we're dealing with here is just men in suits. It doesn't matter what their office claims they are. They're just people like you and me. You know, I've gone to local council meetings here with the local council members, and I've literally brought the local council members to tears, and we've stopped projects they're going to do in the valley simply by calling them out for the fraud that they're committing. And I've put them on the spot. They haven't been able to answer themselves. I've had the whole room stand up and cheer, and they've been shocked that anyone would dare to talk to them like another human being. You know, so I think that's a good approach as well.
Max, we've got
to say something. So
I've got cases in Sydney and Melbourne where we go into court with these COVID fines and said, can we please pick up our bank check for $100,000? And they said, why? Well, because Victoria Police or New South Wales Police Force didn't give me a copy of their commercial contract. They have an ABN. They paid GST. They forgot to give me the contract. Where do I pick up my bank check for $100,000? And after 4 minutes, they're thrown out the door.
Yeah.
2 cases, Sydney and Melbourne. So we do have remedy, but people got to understand you can't go in there and say, oh, where's the Queen? She's gone. The Queen is gone. We let her go because no one put up a fight after we had our vote. So now we're saying you're either going to give us the Queen and the Constitution, or you're going to give me a contract. If you haven't got a contract, we'll go after you because you're breaking Australian law where the figure goes up to $1 million. You see how quickly they back down. The courts included, because they are all incorporated. We're doing this.
And for a police officer personally as well, I mean, for the police officer that's personally issuing this fine, he's doing it under fraudulent circumstances, which means he's actually breaking the law while in police uniform, which carries around about a 20-year jail term if you really want to challenge them. So, yeah.
Right. This is my affidavit, 120 pages. The judge looked at the paperwork and she said, after 4 minutes, get this man out of my courtroom, when he said, where do I pick up my check? And she's got a copy of this in her court. This is an affidavit. This is what I'm going to teach people, how to write an affidavit, not this big. I'm going to be teaching people like Nathan how to put down their record of all their documents they sent to the Commonwealth Bank, that there's no paperwork coming back. They have no rights because we got a book from a professor of law in Queensland, Griffith University, who said that our mortgages are traded onto the stock exchange. I've got her book. Not a Canadian, not English, not American, a Queenslander. And they can't have that book in a courtroom. This is where we're going. We do have remedy, and it's not about protesting in the park in Melbourne and then waving a red ensign flag. Won't work. You put them down for contract because it's all corporations, as you've been saying, Max.
Mm.
And as for COVID, I can't find it on my table with my pile of papers. I've got a Freedom of Information request from the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. There is no document or report in this country of separating the virus from a person, a sample, to prove that there is COVID, such a thing as COVID. I've got the Freedom of Information request.
Yeah, I've been mentioning that. I've been mentioning that to people as well.
$100,000. We are charging $100,000 for that piece of paper to the courts, and they say, "Get out."
Good approach, brother. Good approach. Have you got a website?
It's on its way to being built because my last one was hacked. Like, my computers are hacked on a daily basis.
I'm not surprised.
We are putting up another website, and we're going to be hosting it in another country because nothing is safe anymore. So I will let you know, Max.
Okay. Well, have you got an email address people can contact you? Is there a way people can contact you about all this stuff that you're doing?
Yep. Educate for Protection. One word. Educate for Protection at Gmail.
At gmail.com. No worries. I'll put a link below for people. Anything you'd like to add, Nathan? You've been strangely quiet through the whole proceedings there, brother.
Yeah, I've had to keep my microphone on mute because this one can be quite loud in the background. Just something that I learned recently from Derek, which I thought was a real kicker, is due to the United States Incorporated being bankrupt, therefore, by default, the banks that are registered to them are also insolvent, which means they're trading insolvent, which is a crime, and they cannot ask for any money, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Like you say, none of them are going to want to take this to the International Criminal Court. So they're going to have to just put it back to the way it was, or they're going to face some pretty severe charges. So anything else you'd like to wrap up with before we go?
Apart from everything we've discovered, Max, if there's anybody who has any questions, I'm happy to give you the feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, because we've got to get this message out that if we come together, there are many more of us than there are politicians, and we've got to say to them, enough is enough. We've had enough. It's over. You've taken our trust. We know you don't want to respond to when we write to you. We're going to say, fine. We have to bankrupt politicians like Andrews and Gladys Berejiklian and Palachuk, or as you call it, pile of shit, and say to them, this is where it's got to. We do not trust you to run our state's country anymore. And Robert David Steele has called out, he's an American ex-CIA on video. He's called out ScoMo and Dan Andrews for crimes against humanity. Both of those two men.
I totally agree with that. Crimes against humanity, all of it is an abuse of office. It's all crimes against humanity. And I've been suggesting for a while that it's time the Australian people express a massive loss of confidence in our government's ability to govern, simply by their own actions. I have absolutely no confidence in these people at all. I have no confidence in our police force to do the right thing. I have no confidence in any of these people even to be able to tell a basic truth. So how can you allow yourselves to be governed by these people? But thanks for coming on for a chat, guys. I think we've covered pretty well everything. I'll upload this today, and I urge people to get involved in this. If you're an Australian and you think you own land, don't think that any of this is going to go away. Don't think you can just keep your head down and hope that it's going to be safe to go outside one day, because pretty soon they're going to be in a position where they're just going to come and take you out of your home and just reclaim it. And you'll think that they're actually able to do that, because you'll think all this corporate stuff that they write down is actually law. And it's time to break this little bubble in people's minds, and for people to stand up for this country, or we're going to lose it completely. Thanks for having me on, guy. I mean, thanks for coming on to chat, guys. Sorry, I'm used to being interviewed. I'm used to the other ending, but thanks for coming on for a chat. And look, we'll do it again soon. If you have any more, I mean, if you have any success with this, or you have any more information come to hand that you want to get out to people, don't hesitate to contact me, and we'll get on and we'll do this again. Thanks for coming on for a chat.
Well, Max, I'll leave you one little piece of news. We are putting together an affidavit with the bankruptcy case from the United States, and that's going into the chief executive of one of the big 4 Australian banks. When we have done this, I'm happy to let you know, and then we'll tell you that we have released that document into the banking system in Australia. They are trading insolvent now. That's going to happen, I hope, by the end of this week.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, once you do that, maybe I'll have you back on. Maybe I'll bring you back on same time next month, and we'll have an update on what's going on, or maybe even before then.
Will do.
I
Thank you very
understand
much for having
people-
us, Max.
Hesitancy too in getting started. I was as well. I was a bit fearful of all this, but after sending a couple of letters and the responses we got, you really do get the confidence from that these people are criminals, and they have every leg to stand on, and they have none.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's the way I've always been treating them. Like, it's a criminal enterprise. Whenever they ask me about anything, I say, look, sorry, I don't support organised crime. And that's been my standard response to anything from government. But you're a great example, Nathan, because here's a guy who's your husband there with a little bub. You're not any sort of unusual person. You're just an Australian father, and you put your name to this, and you got a positive result. So maybe that will inspire a little bit of confidence in people.
Derek was the only person I can find that's actually offering remedy. Everyone can tell you what the problem is, but no one can tell you how to fix it. But Derek will take you the way.
Good stuff, brother. And good on you, Derek, for putting your head up and doing this for the country, man. And I'll definitely have you back on in a few weeks, and we'll do a part 2.
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks,
right,
Derek.
Bye, folks.
Thank you.